Most people are spending hundreds of dollars on tutoring, buying textbooks that were written 5 years ago, sitting in lectures that move at someone else's pace, and wondering why none of it is actually working, why they read the chapter and still can't explain what they read, why they attended every class and still failed the exam, why they paid for the tutor and still don't understand the concept. The problem is not them. The problem is the method. And the method has been broken for a very long time. What just changed is that there is now something genuinely different available, not incrementally different, structurally different. In a way that I think changes how serious learning actually works. ChatGPT-5 Study Mode, and I want to tell you exactly what it does, why it works, and the specific system I have developed for using it in a way that produces results that traditional studying simply cannot match. Stay with me, because this changes how you think about learning itself. Not just AI-assisted learning. Learning. Let me start with something that most people have never been told explicitly, but that explains almost everything about why most studying fails. There is a fundamental difference between encountering information and understanding it, and most studying is encountering, not understanding. When you read a chapter, when you watch a lecture, when you highlight your notes, you are encountering information. It enters your awareness, it registers, it feels familiar, and that familiarity, that feeling of having seen something before, creates a very convincing illusion of understanding. Until you try to use the information in a situation you haven't seen before, without your notes in front of you, under conditions that require genuine recall rather than recognition. And you discover that encountering and understanding are not the same thing. That familiarity is not the same as knowledge. That you can recognize something as correct without being able to generate it from memory, and recognition is not what you need in an exam, in a job interview, in a real situation where the knowledge actually matters. What you need is recall, and recall requires something completely different from rereading. It requires retrieval practice, the act of pulling information out of your memory without the source in front of you, under conditions that create genuine difficulty. The research on this is not ambiguous. Retrieval practice produces retention rates 3 to 5 times higher than rereading, over the same amount of study time. That is not a marginal improvement. That is the difference between spending 10 hours studying and genuinely owning the material, and spending 30 hours studying and having it evaporate within a week. The reason most studying is inefficient is that most studying is passive. Rereading, highlighting, summarizing, all passive, all encounter, none of it retrieval. And what ChatGPT-5 Study Mode does, at its core, is force retrieval automatically, naturally, in a format that feels like conversation, rather than like testing. And that shift from passive encounter to active retrieval is the mechanism that changes how much you actually learn. Here is the first thing Study Mode does that makes it genuinely different. It meets you exactly where you are, not where the textbook assumes you are, not where the course syllabus expects you to be, exactly where you actually are, right now, with what you actually know and what you actually don't. Traditional teaching presents information at a fixed level, built around an imaginary average student, who is never quite you. If you are ahead of that level, you are bored. If you are behind it, you are lost, and the information keeps moving regardless. Study Mode starts differently. Before anything else, it wants to know where you are, what you already understand, what specifically confuses you, what you are trying to accomplish with this knowledge, and then it builds from there, from your actual starting point, not a generic one. I tested this with organic chemistry, one of the most notoriously difficult subjects for undergraduate students. I told Study Mode exactly where my understanding broke down. I understood basic molecular structure but couldn't connect it to reaction mechanisms. And instead of starting from the beginning, it started exactly where I was. It built a bridge from what I already understood to what I was missing, in a way that no textbook could have built, because no textbook knows what I specifically already understand. That personalization is not a convenience feature. It is the mechanism that makes explanation actually work, because explanation only works when it connects to something you already know, and the only way to know what you already know is to ask. Here's the second thing, the Socratic approach. And this one changes how you think about thinking. When you ask Study Mode about a concept, it often does not explain it immediately. It asks you a question, specifically chosen to guide you toward figuring out the answer yourself. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like an unnecessarily difficult way to learn something, but here is what actually happens when you use it. You think harder than you would have otherwise. You engage with the material at a level that passive explanation never produces. You make connections yourself. rather than having them made for you, and the connections you make yourself are dramatically more durable than the ones someone else makes for you. Because the act of making the connection is itself the learning, not the receiving of the conclusion, the arriving at it through your own thinking, guided by the right questions. I tested this with prospect theory from behavioral economics, which is notoriously counterintuitive. Rather than explaining it, Study Mode asked me a series of questions about how I would feel in two different scenarios that were mathematically equivalent, but that felt emotionally very different. And through my own answers to those questions, I worked my way to the insight myself, through my own reasoning, and that understanding felt different from anything I have built through passive reading. More stable, more mine, because I built it, rather than received it. Here is the third capability, adaptive difficulty. Within a few interactions, Study Mode develops a sense of how you learn. Not just what you know, how you learn, if you are struggling with a concept. It simplifies, provides more examples, approaches the topic from a completely different angle. If you are grasping things quickly, it increases the challenge, moves toward more complex applications, pushes into territory that requires genuine mastery rather than surface familiarity. Educators call this the zone of proximal development, the place where you are challenged enough to grow, but not so overwhelmed that you shut down. Traditional teaching cannot reliably keep you in that zone, because it is built for groups, and groups have too much variation. Study Mode keeps you in that zone individually, continuously, because it is built for one person, you, and it adjusts in real time, based on what you actually demonstrate, not what the syllabus assumes. Here is the specific system I have developed, after extensive testing, across multiple subjects, and multiple kinds of learners. This is not general advice. This is a specific sequence that you can apply starting today to any subject you are trying to learn. Step 1. Calibrate before you start, before you open any material. Spend 5 minutes telling Study Mode what you are trying to learn, what you already know about the subject, what specifically confuses you, what you need this knowledge for, an exam, a project, a career change, a genuine curiosity. This 5 minutes changes everything that follows, because Study Mode can now target exactly what you need, rather than covering everything at a generic level. Step 2. Encounter the material once. Read the chapter, watch the lecture, review the notes, once, without highlighting, without rereading sections immediately. Once, with a specific goal, not to understand everything, to notice what confuses you, to identify what doesn't click, to locate the edges of your understanding. Most students reread material multiple times, hoping familiarity produces understanding. It does not. Read once, note confusion, move forward. Step 3. Reconstruct without looking. Close your notes, open Study Mode, and explain everything you just learned in your own words, without looking at anything. Everything you remember, everything you think you understood. In your own words, Study Mode will listen, and then it will tell you exactly what you got right, what you missed, what you partially understood, and what your explanation reveals about where your actual understanding breaks down. This step is uncomfortable. It reveals how much less you retain than you thought. That discomfort is the learning. Do not skip it. Step 4. Fill the gaps. Now Study Mode knows exactly where your understanding breaks down, and it addresses exactly those places. Not everything, not the parts you already understand, the specific gaps your reconstruction revealed. This is the most efficient form of explanation you will ever experience, because every explanation is targeted to what you specifically need, rather than to what someone else might need. Step 5. Go Socratic on the important concepts. After the gap filling, ask Study Mode to engage Socratically on the concepts that matter most, the ones you need to genuinely own, not just recognize. This is where the real understanding gets built, through your own thinking, guided by questions rather than through receiving explanations. Step 6. Apply to situations you have not seen. Ask Study Mode to give you problems, scenarios, cases, situations that require you to apply what you have learned in a format you have not practiced. This is where genuine understanding gets confirmed, and where gaps that survived all the previous steps reveal themselves and get addressed. Step 7. Schedule the review. Before you end the session, ask Study Mode to generate 3 to 5 questions testing the core concepts. Save them. Come back to them tomorrow. Without reviewing the material first, answer from memory, and see what survived. What you can still recall after sleeping is what you actually learned. What evaporated needs another pass. This is spaced retrieval practice, the most evidence-supported learning technique available. And Study Mode makes executing it simple. Let me tell you where this system is most powerful, because the results vary by subject type, and knowing where it works best helps you use it most strategically. For technical subjects, mathematics, science, programming, engineering, study mode's ability to probe your actual mechanistic understanding is extraordinary. These are subjects where you can use terminology correctly without actually understanding the mechanism. And study mode finds that gap immediately, because it asks questions that require mechanistic explanation, not just correct terminology. For conceptual subjects, economics, philosophy, psychology, political theory, study mode excels at showing you how ideas connect, at building the conceptual map that most linear presentations obscure, at helping you see that things which seem separate actually fit together in a coherent structure. For professional certification preparation, medical licensing, bar exam, CPA, any high-stakes certification with large volumes of material, the combination of forced retrieval and precise gap identification is particularly powerful, because in these contexts, knowing specifically what you do not know before the exam reveals it is worth more than almost any other form of preparation. Here is something honest I want to say, because honest is more useful than promotional. Study mode is extraordinarily effective at building understanding, at forcing the active engagement that produces real learning, at identifying and filling gaps in your knowledge. What it cannot do is replace experience. Studying medicine is not practicing medicine. Studying programming is not building software. Studying business is not running a business. The understanding you develop through study mode is real and necessary and dramatically better than what most traditional studying produces. But it is not the complete picture. The complete learning loop requires both the conceptual understanding that study mode helps you build, and the applied experience that only comes from actually doing. Use study mode to build the understanding that makes the doing more productive. Use the doing to test and deepen the understanding in ways no tool can fully replicate. That combination is how serious learning works, at any level, in any domain. Here is where I want to leave you. The reason most people struggle with learning is not intelligence, it is method. They are using passive methods that produce passive results. They are rereading when they should be retrieving. They are encountering when they should be engaging. They are going through the motions of studying when genuine cognitive difficulty is what actually builds understanding. Study mode does not make learning easy. Nothing makes serious learning easy. Genuinely difficult material requires genuine effort. What study mode does is make that effort more targeted, more efficient, more likely to produce actual understanding, rather than the illusion of it, by forcing retrieval instead of enabling passive review, by calibrating to your specific knowledge state, by identifying gaps with precision, by making Socratic engagement available at any hour on any subject at any depth. The 7-step system is not theoretical, it is what works. Based on real testing, against real material, under real conditions. Pick one subject, run one session, using the system exactly as described, and compare what you actually retain to what you retain from an equivalent amount of traditional studying. The difference will change how you approach learning from this point forward. Not because the tool is magic, because it finally aligns the method with how understanding actually gets built. Through retrieval, through engagement, through genuine cognitive effort directed at exactly the right places. That is what serious learning requires, and now you have a tool that makes it possible. On demand, any subject, anytime, starting today.